Video 7, the Borken Spears. So we're back to Tlatelolco and why it's so interesting, this narrative that was rescued from the anonymous authors of Tlatelolco regarding the conquest of the Mexicas. First of all, Tlatelolco means in the place of the Mount Earth, and it has always been regarded as the twin city of Mexico. Tlatelolco was founded along with the Tenochas. They find this space in the middle of the Lake Texcoco that is granted to them by the lords of Azcapotzalco, and they form what they start calling a calpulli. A calpulli is a barrio, a hood, a neighborhood. And this begins happening around the dates of 1338. With time, the Tlatelolcans came to be respected and known as very educated people that had their city organized by guilds and calpulis, and more importantly, for our historical record is to know that it's when they create a triple alliance, the Tenochas, the Texcocans, and Tlacopan, to defeat the lords of Azcapotzalco. Now, this is a picture from the Códice Tlatelolco, where we see Don Diego de Mendoza in Anhuayantzin sitting in a Castilian chair. And this is in 1549. We'll see why that is important. Is because Tlatelolco, as we mentioned in the earlier presentation, was allowed to maintain the indigenous self-ruled. Okay? In this next slide, what we have is the kings of Tlatelolco as painted in the Florentine Codex. We have Cuacuapatzinahuac as one of the first kings of Tlatelolco from 1351 to 1409. We have Tlacateotl from 1409 to 1430. We have from 1430 to 1467 Cuautlatoa. And then we have from 1467 till 1473 Moquihuix. And in this one we have the fall of Moquihuix depicted in the Codex Mendoza. So this is kind of an interesting story because we have family quarrels between Moquihuix and Axayatl, who was the past Tenocha king. Both cities had military strength, but usually the Moquihuix knew that it had much to lose with the Tenochas. So it seems to have been that Moquihuix killed himself, and instead of surrendering in a fight. Now, there are many historical discrepancies, but the point is that from this moment on, the Tlatelolcans would start paying tribute to their twin sister, the Tenochas. Why is this relevant? Because in the moment that the Spanish arrive, the Tlatelolcans, just like most of the groups that joined the Spanish, would have made sense if they would have joined the Spanish, but instead they chose to stay with the Mexicas and fight the Spanish and the Tlaxcaltecans, the Texcocans, and the thousands of people that rallied behind them. Today, if you go to Mexico City, this is what you would see from Tlatelolco, one of the earliest churches also built in Mexico, right with the stones of the temples of Tlatelolco. Now, there are very important things that happens here in Tlatelolco. For example, after the city is besieged, most of the Mexicas end up residing in Tlatelolco, and this is where in Tlatelolco where the last stands take place. So it has a very important collective consciousness, historical symbolism for Mexicans today, kind of the last bastion where the main battles took place. It regains yet more importance because in this place in 1968 a massacre happened where the Mexican government shot at students and basically unravel cries for social justice in Mexico since that moment up until today. People are marching on the streets every October 2nd to commemorate the unfaithful day in which this happened. Anyway, so Tlatelolco is a very symbolic place in the Mexican narrative. That's what we're getting at, okay? And it has deep, deep roots back to being one of the last places where the Mexicas held their ground against the Spanish invaders. So it's important to reflect upon these types of questions. Whose account is this reported on? When Cuauhtémoc's feet were burned? Who put the priest in charge of the temple of Huitzilopochtli to death? Right? How do we hear that Macuilxochitl, the king of Huitzolpolchoco, and Pitzotzin, the king of Culhuacan in Coyoacán, were hanged? Also, in what type of narratives did we hear that they fed the keeper of the Black House, along with several other elders, to dogs? We also know that 3 wise men of Hecatl from Texcoco were devoured by dogs. So these are very traumatic events that displays a type of violence. That's why Roque Dalton, the famous Salvadorian poet literate, explained that Borken Spears helps us understand the type of political violence that's still going on today in Latin America. Now, next time that you see or hear or read about encounters of native peoples that are praying and that are attacked by dogs, you would now be referred to why people think of these processes as very rooted in a traumatic history of invasions and violence. Now, obviously, this is the reason why the accounts of Tlatelolco, the accounts of the Flores Codentino are such a relevant portrayals of what really occurred, because we do not hear about these treacherous acts or violent acts in the main narratives of the conquerors such as Bernal Díaz del Castillo, or even in the letters of Hernán Cortés. Another important point to think about. This is the route of Cortés in 1519, getting to Jalapa, Ixhuacán, to Xocotla, Ixtlahuamaztlán, Atalaya, Zompancingo, Tlaxcala. Okay? Then they remember march to Cholula, defeat the Cholulans, get to Amecameca, get to Ayotzingo, Mixquic. Okay? It's Tapalapa and Mexico City. Now, there's a very important part actually here in this map. They go from Tlaxcala over here to Texcoco, and here, sorry, this route is the second one. Remember, so they come in, they take over, and they have already conquered the city. And very interestingly, this is when Cortés goes away, right? And upon his return, he finds that Pedro de Alvarado has massacred the main Mexica warriors, that the people in Mexico City are very upset, and therefore they decide to escape. In this escape is when they almost get killed, in La Noche Triste. And I like this map because it makes us reflect upon this fact. In the moment that the Spanish are almost killed in the La Noche Triste, and they barely survive, they get to this part of the lake, and they still have time to go all the way here and return to Tlaxcala. So the main question arises is that how come the peoples and all of this Lake of Texcoco was inhabited by people as well? And all of these people, instead of attacking the Spanish and killing them, instead they help them, they feed them, and then they help them get back to Tlaxcala. Okay, so this is an interesting part. Why would people be so helpful to the Spanish? Well, I'm returning back to this map to reflect upon the fact that when the Tlatelolcans and the Mexicas arrived here, people have been living in Lake Texcoco for 10,000 years. And when they arrive, the people that lead the area are the lords of Azcapotzalco. and it is Coatl, the first emperor of the Aztec, that tells us that he burned all the books of Azcapotzalco, claiming himself as the only person worthy of keeping books. Okay, so this is very important. What does that mean? That means that the Aztecs and the Tlatelolcans were foreigners to this land, because, as they tell us, they were nomads that came from the north. So in reality, they were the newest people to arrive to the Lake Texcoco. And the alliances that all of these other people made with the Spanish reflects that in the collective consciousness of the peoples of the Lake Texcoco, they never forgot that the Aztecs were foreigners. And that's why it would make sense that most people, especially in what would be today Mexico City, most people fought with the Spanish against the Aztecs. And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow for many Mexicans today. So I just thought it as a very important part of our analysis. Now, up until today, we have many issues regarding the series of misrepresentations that have taken place when we think about the Aztecs, and everything comes to the analysis of the present day ritual behavior. Now we've reached the end of video 7. We will continue our lecture in video 8.